Welcome back to the channel where I provide regular cricket content on interesting topics. Today's video is the first of a two-part series where I list who I believe are the best 10 Test wicket-keepers in the history of the game. I will be including both their wicket-keeping skills and also their ability with the bat to chip in with runs also. Wicket-keeping can be a thankless job in that they usually only get noticed when they miss a catch or a stumping, as generally they are expected to take everything. So with that in mind, I wanted to make a video to appreciate some of the keeping legends from the history of the game. Let's get started with the list. When I included Matt Prior in my greatest England side of all time, I was subjected to a barrage of comments criticising the selection. Whilst I appreciate it is subjective, I think that Matt Prior went almost unappreciated during his time in the England side. One of the common names which got suggested in front of Prior was Alex Stewart. But let me just briefly compare the two. Stewart averaged 2.9 dismissals a game when he was keeping, Prior averaged 3.2. When keeping in the match, Stewart's batting average was 34.9, Prior's was 40.2. So Prior has Stewart covered from both angles. What people often forget is that when Stewart was a specialised batsman his record greatly improved, but when he was keeping it is pretty average. In terms of his performances for England, Prior was a mainstay in a side which achieved the #1 ranking in the world during the early 2010s. He was known for aggressive batting and solid wicket-keeping. Prior's powers reached their peak during England's tour of New Zealand in 2013. He saved the final test in Auckland, and the series, with a defiant, out-of-character century, batting for 4.5 hours for an unbeaten 110. He won England's Player of the Year award that same year. Overall, for his aggressive batting and fine glove work, Matt Prior is a worthy addition to this list. This list is going to be all about balance, as there are a number of players who were stronger in one aspect of the role than others. Although he was a handy lower-order batter, he was in the side very much so as a dedicated wicket-keeper. This ability is represented in his dismissal ratio of 3.8 dismissals every Test match. He broke records with the gloves both in one-day cricket and in the Test arena. With a final tally of 532 catches in Tests, he set a record which is unlikely to ever be matched. Although his batting average of 30 is nothing to shout about, he was known to chip in with valuable runs at difficult times. His batting style epitomised South African cricket during this era, with a chest-out, no-nonsense approach. Overall, he was a key member of the South African side to the point that although they had de Villiers as an option with the gloves for the latter part of his career, he still was picked for the role. For his guts and record-breaking keeping achievements, the tough South African is a worthy number 9 on this list. Perhaps overshadowed by his predecessor, Adam Gilchrist, Haddin is another one of those keepers who goes a little bit unnoticed. This is deeply unfair, however, as the tough Aussie has a stats record right up there with the better keeper batsman in the history of the game. His entry into the Test arena was delayed by Gilchrist, whose presence prevented Haddin from making his Test debut until the age of 30. However, Haddin made up for lost time by eventually becoming vice-captain to Michael Clarke and a key senior figure in a developing side. Haddin's peak probably came during the 2013-14 Ashes clean sweep, when he bailed Australia out of tricky positions in every first innings of the campaign. He ended up with 493 runs at 61.62, which put him second only to David Warner on the run tally. He was extremely solid behind the stumps also. Overall, with the bat in hand, Haddin had a batting average of 33, with 400s to his name. His keeping record is probably better than his batting, with Haddin averaging 4.1 dismissals per game. For his ability to repeatedly dig Australia out of tricky situations and an excellent keeping record, Brad Haddin is a worthy number 8 in this list. Currently working wonders as the England Test coach, it will be fun to recount what an excellent keeper batsman the Kiwi was. A natural attacker in every sense, there was a sense of theatre every time the burly McCullum would come out to bat. People almost always think of McCullum as a one-day player, and particularly he is known for his electrifying impact on the IPL, but in the Test arena is where he may have been at his most impressive. McCullum scored over 6,000 runs at an average of 39, including 12 hundreds. His strike rate was the highest of nearly all of the keeper batsmen on this list, being 65 runs per 100 balls. Although he wasn't keeping in the match, it is impossible to talk about McCullum's batting without mentioning his record-breaking 100 against Australia in 2016, where he brought up his 100 in just 54 balls. As a keeper he averaged 3.4 dismissals per game, which is not incredible, but added to his explosive batting he is a worthy entrant in this top 10. AB has been probably the hardest for me to place in this list, particularly in reflection to his South African teammate. I can hear the disagreements already in that how can I have de Villiers rated higher when South Africa preferred the later for around 70 tests. My argument to that would be that if it were a straight-up choice between the two and they couldn't play both, I almost guarantee that they would pick AB. The obvious reason for this is his batting, with de Villiers being one of the most talented batting keepers of all time. What a batter he was! De Villiers had many memorable performances in the Test arena, but probably his best year was 2008. He started with a blistering 103 not out in the Durban Test against West Indies. Later that year he became the first South African to score a double century against India in an innings win in Ahmedabad. He followed that with 174 at Headingley and 106 not out in Perth, in South Africa's first series wins in the two countries since readmission. Doubters will say that his batting performances dropped when he was keeping, but the stats show otherwise. In fact, his batting average as a keeper would stand up against any of the dedicated batsmen of the game's history, being 57. His dismissal ratio when he had the gloves was a very good 3.9 dismissals per test match. Where there was genuine doubt in my mind in terms of where to place AB, was that he only kept in 24 test matches. This raises the question of should he be in the list at all. However, though, there is no escaping the fact that he was a very solid keeper and has some of the best batting statistics when compared to his peers. So for his God-given ability with the bat and tidy glove work, AB is a worthy number 6 in my list. So there are my numbers from 10 through to 6, and if it seems like there is a bit of recency bias present, that is not the case. I dug into the records of some of the top keepers going back further into Test cricket history, and they simply don't stack up. I will give you a couple of examples. Alan Knott was widely known as the best keeper of his era, but yet his dismissals per game ratio was 2.8, that added to his batting average of 32.7 doesn't really get him in with the above company. Then from an Australian point of view I looked into Rodney Marsh. His dismissals per test match was 3.7, but then he is dragged down by his batting average being 26.5. Moin Khan averaged just 28.5 with the bat and had a dismissal ratio of just 2.2 per game, which was very surprising. Ian Healy's stats aren't much better. I actually think that a certain other Australian keeper who may appear in the top 5 is to blame for this recency bias. From Gilchrist's explosion onto the scene, keepers were almost forced to multitask and be a real asset with the bat as well as the gloves. Where will Gilly land in my top 5? You will have to watch the next video to find out. You could possibly argue that the pitches have become more consistent over time also, but that is debatable. Who knows the reasons, but from a stats analysis point of view, it does seem as if keepers have come on. As ever, thank you to everyone for watching and participating.